I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. Now, I'm glad that we have the desire to understand the world. That results in all sorts of great stuff. We want to know everything. We're humans. We're curious. And maybe it's our culture. Maybe it's just humanity. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. Suddenly, I know that I don't know. But somehow everyone else seems to know. They all know differently from each other, but they all seem to know. What I'm saying is nobody's opinions are correct in the world. And yet it's impossible not to tie your opinions to your concept of self. And often people tie those things so closely together that they begin defending their guesses as if they're defending their very lives. In a way, they are. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
You know, I really encourage people that are walking away from their faith to own it, because it's so empowering to just say, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. This is my life. I want to live my life.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 187 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob Pondillo and I interview a Canadian guest who'll go by the name Freddy to protect his identity. He's not fully out to his friends, family, and co-workers. His faith began to crumble when he discovered that his dear, dear Lutheran grandmother, who raised him, was going to hell according to his Church of Christ. Freddy is a passionate communicator, and I think you're going to enjoy his story. I don't have a long monologue today. I just want to say that I admire the image, at least, of an old sage sitting under a tree, full of wisdom, knowledge, experience, and yet he tells no one. He doesn't try to teach or enlighten, unless, of course, someone asks. But even then, he discerns whether they're ready to hear it, and doesn't waste it on those on whom it would be lost. In that way, he's also respecting them and honoring the unspoken boundary of presumed pedagogy. Answering questions no one has asked is ineffective and unattractive, and presumptuous to play the role of teacher. That role is given, not taken without consent. These monologues are my attempt to practice pedagogy and the passion for teaching that is within me. I feel okay doing that because I interpret the act of you listening to this show is your consent, even your inquiry. But having said that, I can't help but hear the accusing voice in my head saying, "Who do you think you are?" The truth is that education rarely happens in a vacuum or when one is by themselves. It is relationships that help us grow. So we all play the role of teacher in others' lives from time to time. Sometimes it's presumptuous. Sometimes it's by invitation. The wisdom to know the difference is a telltale sign of the integrity of the teacher and thus the potency of their wisdom. More often than not, we should keep our mouths shut, keep our revelations, wisdom, insight, and epiphanies to ourselves, and just hope that someday somebody asks. But I know that I need to work on being okay with no one ever asking. We taped the following conversation on January 21st, 2018.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can make a monthly pledge to Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was created by yours truly. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
It's Bob.
Yes,
over
Bob.
there. Yes, nice to see you. And Cass is over there.
Well, hey, it's good to meet you.
Yeah, we're shaking
Yes.
hands here.
The virtual handshake.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Welcome to the Everyone's Agnostic podcast. So tell me about how you found us.
I found you guys actually via Ryan Bell.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's right.
Yeah.
We gained a lot of listeners from when he had me on, and he and I are good friends and have remained good friends all these years. I mean, we had him on almost 3 years ago.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Ryan Bell? Weren't they going to do a documentary on him?
I think they're
something?
still working on it. I don't
Still
know
working on
if
it.
it's out or not, but yeah.
Huh, wow.
I just read where he just took Bart Campolo's job at University of Southern California
Whoa.
as the humanist chaplain. Well,
That's outstanding.
Bart moved to Cincinnati.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
he's a humanist chaplain there on the University of Cincinnati. I don't know what the college is called. Do you know?
University
I
of
know.
Cincinnati, probably. Yeah, I don't know. No.
Yeah, and I'd seen that on the Life After God Facebook group that he had moved on to that position. So
Yeah.
Good for him.
good for him.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
do you find these private Facebook groups helpful?
Absolutely.
Aren't they neat?
It's great to be able to just sort of share some yucks and giggles about some of the stuff we've all experienced.
Well, and it's kind of an acute little community where a lot of the world doesn't relate to it, and as we learned last week with our interview with Joy, some people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, that's
Well,
true.
well, no. And it's funny because I know there was some comments on the Life, I think it was the Life After God yesterday. Somebody had commented and said, having come out,
Yeah.
how do you discuss this sort of stuff with other people, and do other people get fed up with it?
Yeah.
And I'd made a comment. I said, my wife and I have both left religion, and I find that we've got a new dog, and we go for a lot of walks with the dog, and I end up always bringing it up, and I think she's getting tired of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's such an important central part of your life. I get that. It's funny. You were talking about how some people just don't get it. We were at the Women's March in Nashville yesterday. Right. Well, this is being recorded a day after that. Anyway,
Right.
There was a guy off to the side of the group of this 15,000 people, and he was a Christian fella.
Preaching into a megaphone.
Preaching into a megaphone, saying things like, my wife is at home, washing the dishes and washing the clothes. That's where she is. That's where you should be. And I'm thinking, tone deaf. I mean, how is it possible to even say that without police around you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
and they live in just a different world, a different reality almost.
And the thing is, Bob, is that many of us that have come out of, especially out of fundamentalist religious beliefs,
Sure.
had that exact same philosophy drilled into us of, the woman sits at home, she cooks, she cleans, you make sure that the husband's got a good dinner on the table when he gets home.
Barefoot and pregnant.
Oh, yeah. And it's like,
boy.
wow. Like I knew there was a couple in our church when we were here that he had married a woman from Texas. And when she came here, she couldn't work for a number of years because she couldn't get her immigration status. They couldn't afford it. And he was working at a grocery store and trying to come up with the money. And then, they had kids and she never, ever got a job. But yet they were like poor and destitute and broke because they wanted her at home looking after the kids. And he's working in the grocery store stocking shelves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Just sad.
Yeah, and if they would move in a different direction, like, well, you're able-bodied, go get a job, and we'll be better off as a family. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, you can, and there's a spectrum here, because even within Christianity, probably even within fundamentalism, well, I shouldn't say that, because as soon as you depart from being a literal scripture adherer, then you kind of aren't a fundamentalist anymore. But there's a lot of Christians who treat their wives as equals.
Yeah.
I mean, not to, just broad brush here. Yeah. However, we can say that when they do that, they are departing from scripture.
Right.
Yep. Well, and I'll have to say, I kind of feel that I myself was a little more progressive, and my wife and I talked about this yesterday while we were out walking the dog. I said, some of the decisions that we made, she always knew that I had the final say, but I always did my best to make sure that I treated her as my equal. And I think I saw that just because of the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
As a really young boy by my grandmother.
Okay. Let's talk about that. You were raised by your grandmother?
I was. So my mom, this was back in the late 60s when I was born. My mom was 17, 18 years old, unwed. And I mean, back in those days, social services would have stepped in and said, listen, you can't raise this kid. You got to get rid of him. Like, you got to adopt him out. Yeah. And my mom really hummed and hawed. And my grandmother, who had been a caregiver her entire life, really, she prayed to God and said, I want him to go to a Christian home if he's going to get adopted out. And
I'll take you.
Yeah, I'll take you. So social services said, well, if you're willing to be his guardian, we'll let you take him.
Okay. What about your grandfather?
He had passed on long before I was born.
Okay, so it's just you and her?
Yeah.
Up in Canada?
Yes.
All right, you're calling from Calgary, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I grew up in a town about 135 miles south of Calgary.
South.
Mm-hmm.
South.
Yeah, that's okay.
A boot.
Yeah. What was it all about?
It was all about it.
All right, so she said, I want to raise you in a Christian home, and she did. What was your denomination?
She was Lutheran.
Okay, well, that's pretty liberal.
Yeah, and she had come out of the Baptist faith when she got married to her husband in would have been just after the Second World War in Germany.
Oh, geez.
She grew up Baptist, and when they got married, the thing to do was to convert to your husband's religion.
Okay,
and so she took on his Lutheran faith.
Okay, so your grandfather was German?
Yes, actually, both grandmother and grandfather were German.
Oh, did they speak with a kind of a accent?
I didn't notice that my grandmother spoke with an accent until my wife and I had been married for several years, and we'd moved away, and we'd go back on weekends every once in a while to see them. And it was like, oh, wait a minute, Grandma does have an accent. Holy crap, I never noticed that.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Well,
wow.
we never know what we have until we have something to contrast it against.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what, just you and her, you're going to the Lutheran church.
Yep.
At what point in your childhood or whatever did you feel that you had a personal relationship with God?
I probably would have been so the other thing was my grandmother, I think she lived on social assistance. I'm not entirely sure. She always had sort of little odd jobs, and one of the odd jobs she had was that she was the cleaning lady at the local Lutheran church.
Okay.
And so I often went with her on Saturday and just tagged along. She would clean the building, and I'd spend the morning with the pastor as he was running around getting things ready for Sunday.
Now, surely you crawled underneath the pews.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, see, that's a fun thing. Was it carpeted or was it tiled?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was all carpeted.
Okay. Because when it's tiled, you can grab on and almost slide.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, and you just pew by pew, you push yourself through.
Is this something you did, Kath?
Oh yeah.
So you did this? Okay. Well, I guess that's something to do. Yeah.
So early on, I had this inkling, and as I followed the pastor around, he was printing all the pamphlets off on the old stenographs, or what the heck was
Yeah.
Like the old printing machines or whatever. He was doing the church bulletin, and so I'd hang around with them all the time, and it was at a very early age hanging around with the pastor and thinking, hey, this is kind of a cool job, and I did have that. My grandmother said I had a very soft touch, like I can be somewhat emotional or whatever. I'm sort of very in tune with that sort of thing.
You're an empath.
I am, and so I think there's some of that quality in a lot of people that are in that pastoral care, that
the good
ministerial works. The good ones, yeah. And so at about 6 years of age, my mom found a guy and married him, and then I went to go and live with them, but still kept in very close contact with my grandmother. And I ended up going to services for still a few years with my grandmother. Mm-hmm. But eventually my parents decided that Lutheran Church was just a little too mainstream. And my dad was sort of a hippie kind of guy. You know, he had the John Lennon glasses back in the 60s and 70s and the big afro hair and the big bell bottoms. Like, he was super hippie dude. And so he wasn't looking for a mainstream church. He was looking for something a little different.
Yeah. We call that high church.
Yeah.
Yeah, where there's liturgy. And did the pastor wear a robe? Or
in Lutherans? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, you're walking around the church and you're shadowing him. Was he a good guy?
Oh, he was a super good guy.
So it's a good, you didn't have a dad through that time, and so maybe a male figure probably really helped your life.
Oh yeah, no, he absolutely did. And he definitely looked out for my grandmother and I. There's no doubt about it. And they had a good understanding of each other, or relationship, or whatever. So
So it wasn't a bad experience. I mean, it
was
gave you community.
It was a good experience.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think had I stayed in the Lutheran Church, I probably would have ended up becoming a pastor, and I probably would have never gone down this path.
Okay. But you went back to with your mom and stepdad, right?
Yep.
Was that a good experience? I mean, was it just you again?
Yeah, so it was just me. I mean, I was 6 when they got married, and it would have been probably 6.5 or 7 years old when I moved in with them, because they were living quite a ways away, and they moved back to where my grandmother was.
Okay.
What church did your hippie dad go to then?
There you go.
Good question. I have no idea. I think he grew up a Catholic. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure, or it may have been Baptist. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, he's probably one of those Doobie Brother guys. Jesus is just all right with me. It's kind of a flower child.
Well, I think that's what he was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, so I ended up moving in with the folks, and they went church shopping. And the thing was, I still remember them going to a lot of like super duper evangelical churches, and very, very charismatic, where people are frying on the floor like bacon, and should have bought a Honda.
Yeah, speaking in tongues.
Speaking of tongues, and I think.
Well, could you hold on about? I just want to hear about the bacon.
Flopping on the floor like bacon.
I love bacon, but so
who doesn't?
What do you mean? So they were frying on the floor? You mean like
you get filled with the Holy Spirit? Sometimes it manifests in your body.
And you go on the floor and you make sizzling sounds.
You just shake. It's almost like it's a Jesus seizure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, as a kid, like I'm 8 years old, and I'm watching these people that basically look like they're having seizures on the floor. It's like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
At 8 years old.
Well, here's the thing, and we've said this before, Bob, that when you believe in God and the earth is lonely and crazy and chaotic, then God is the stabilizing factor, and he's so big and powerful, and he runs the universe. He holds the planets in place, and if he were to touch you, and not only would you feel special, but you want it to be true so bad that you would almost relinquish your body and your will to whatever might happen, and you might help it along a little bit, because it feels so good to know that God has his mind on me when he's keeping the moon going around Saturn or whatever. It's just very, very special.
Wow.
Yeah.
How old were you when you began to doubt or question your faith?
Oh, for me, I had some issues. I mean, later on, probably in my 20s, like once I'd gotten out of high school and out of college.
Sure. With evolution or?
I don't know. I think part of my problem was growing up as a teenager that the church I was in, because I grew up in, like, eventually at about 10 years old, I got baptized. Actually, my dad and I both got baptized the exact same day.
Okay.
After having what they call a gospel meeting. That's a very, very common term in the Church of Christ. You'll have a guest preacher come in, and he does a whole sermon series every night for like a week.
Well, that's a big departure from, I learned a new word this week. In Australia, they call the holy rollers, what he was referring to, the bacon and stuff, happy clappies. That's what Australians call
happy clappy.
Charismatic evangelicals. No, but I'm saying it's a contrasting. The Church of Christ here in Tennessee, in Oklahoma, where I'm from, are very they're the opposite of happy clappy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of stoic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so that's the thing. So in Canada, there really are two branches of the Church of Christ, and I fucking hate this term. I'm going to swear a lot in this.
Go for it.
There's conservative and there's liberal churches of Christ, right? And so in the conservative movement, yes, very stoic. It's very by the book, very literal biblical teaching and following.
And miracles don't happen, and the gifts are over.
The gifts are done. There's no the Holy Spirit lives in you, or dwells in you. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. But that's just to help you and guide you into the truth of the Scripture.
Right. Exactly. Whereas the liberal side of the Church of Christ in Canada generally tends to be you've got instrumental music.
Oh yeah.
The Holy Spirit lives in you and guides you. It's like, oh hey, look, there's a parking spot. Oh, thank you, Holy Spirit. And they also have schools and ministries and all kinds of stuff. And so the two you do not mix. And if you find people that try to do the crossover here and they know about, oh well, you're a liberal and you're a conservative, there's great animosity. It's really quite sad.
So which one were you?
Very conservative.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now, your aspirations to be a minister, did they diminish, like maybe at college, or what degree did you get?
So I've got an electronics engineering technology diploma. It's very similar to an engineering degree. All I'm really missing is some of the liberal arts stuff, I guess, and maybe a few extra mathematical courses in order to become a full-on engineer. But I had, having grown up in the church, again, the preacher we had at our local church was a really good guy. He really mentored me, really, really pulled me in, and I really thought I wanted to become a preacher. And this would have been in my early teens. And part of the thing about the Church of Christ, especially the conservative side, is they don't necessarily say, oh, you have to go to theological school to learn how to teach and to preach and to do all that sort of stuff. You can learn at home, and you can be mentored by the local preacher or whatever, and you can learn how to do all that stuff. And so that's kind of what I did. And the local preacher there, and that's the other thing, is in Canada, trying to get funding and support for the preachers, it's horrible. They basically have to go begging everywhere to get funding, right? So there's no head office where they give and hand out money to the different churches. Every church is locally supported.
Well, did they promote the tithe?
No, it was always give what you want. We know we're happy with whatever you give.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think some of the people in the Church of Christ are just the cheapest bastards you'll ever meet.
Well, it is the more happy-clappy evangelicals that emphasize the tithe.
Oh, absolutely.
And they hardcore emphasize it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so that was the thing. So that this preacher, who I'd gotten to be really good friends with and who had really mentored me and was helping me learn how to teach and to preach and all that sort of stuff, he took me aside once, and when he knew I wanted to become a preacher, and he says, I don't think you should do this. He said, you might want to do it on the side, but otherwise you're just a beggar. And he eventually got out and ended up going and getting a nursing degree because he was so sick and tired of just constantly begging for money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately that ultimately led to the end of his relationship with God too, because his wife ended up having an affair.
Wow.
They left the church. It was a disaster.
So you know him today? You keep in touch?
I haven't really kept in touch with him. I've actually looked him up on Facebook. I've been tempted to contact him and say, dude, why did you leave? I'm really curious to know I'm not going to judge you or anything because I'm in the same boat you're in. And I don't know. I guess one day maybe I'll have to get in touch with him on Facebook. I've seen him a few times over the years because we'd gone back to our home church a few times in the last, 20 years. And he's been there because his family was still very part of the church there.
Yeah.
So are you the only child of your mother?
No, I have another sister who is 8 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm. What's your relationship with her?
Now it's really good.
Okay. She lived there in Calgary?
No, she's out in BC near Vancouver.
Okay. Where does your parents live?
They're in BC in the central interior.
Okay.
In British Columbia.
Okay.
Do they know that you've left the faith, or do they care?
They know I've left the faith. My mom is very disappointed because she knew. I mean, that was one of the things always when I got a birthday card or whatever from her. It was like, we're always so proud of the good Christian young man you've grown up to be. And when I told her, I told her probably 2 years ago now that that my wife and I were looking at leaving our church just because we're so fed up with things. And she was like, well, just pray about it and I'll pray for you and hopefully things will work out. She said, I'm really disappointed that things have gotten to where they are. And it's too bad you couldn't be here because you'd really like the church here. Mm-hmm. And which is kind of funny because the last weekend I ever attended church service was with them in the interior. And I'm just listening to the preacher there, who I knew from my home congregation years ago. He moved out to this place to preach, and I was listening to him, and I just went, I just can't take this bullshit anymore. Like I just can't. This is just such garbage.
Yeah. So was it a slow process? Maybe and then include your wife's journey. Like, how did you guys make this journey together? Yeah.
So it was a slow process, like I say. So in my 20s or my teenage years, there were no Christian girls really there were no Christian girls at all in my congregation. There was 3 guys. So I struggled a lot, right? You're 15, 16 years old. You're full of hormones. There's girls walking around. You want to be a part of this, but there's no Christian girls to date. So, I mean, I dated a lot of girls that were non-Christian, eventually go to college, struggle with some things. I had many friends who were atheists. And I remember telling him and having an argument. I remember sitting in some coffee shop with a buddy of mine who was a staunch atheist. And I said, well, the earth is only 6,000 years old. And he's like, are you fucking nuts? And that was sort of my first real experience of trying to butt up against somebody who was a true evolutionist. Mm-hmm. And so I remember we argued back and forth. And so this is in my 20s. And so struggling, my faith waned. And I wouldn't say there was anything that really caused me to wane other than it was really hard to be a good Christian kid when there was nobody else to hang out with, and all my friends were worldly.
You went to public school?
Yeah, I went to public school. I did not homeschool. My parents were not that way. I mean, I know people now that do that. But yeah, so I mean, I got into drinking and blah, blah, blah in my 20s. And then I got a job. You'll like this, Bob. I worked in radio. I was a broadcast engineer.
Really? Wow.
For a number of years, and I can totally relate to WKRP. It really is true. Yeah. Especially in private broadcast, it's quite wild. And so there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on. And I sort of was like, okay. And I struggled, and I was trying to make my way in the world. And I met my wife through the radio station, and actually, quite funnily enough, playing volleyball.
Company picnic?
Yeah, well, it was a company thing. So we used to challenge businesses or whatever to come play, and they would bring donations for the food bank. And I remember sitting down at a local restaurant with my buddies, and I'd had a few pints for sure. And then the next thing I know, this woman comes to our table, and of course I'm the goofball of the group, just being loud and goofy. And she plops down with a pitcher of beer and says, "Here, guys." I was like, holy crap, I love you. Beer, wow.
It was love at first drink,
sip, whatever.
Wow. Yeah, so a couple of years later, we ended up getting married. She grew up Catholic.
Okay.
And I remember the first time that I walked into her apartment, or actually, I guess it would have been her house. There were 2 books of Catholicism on her bookshelf, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And I thought, oh, shit. I got one of these. Great.
So you were already kind of moving away from your devoted.
I was.
Yeah.
I was, but there were some things that happened in my wife's life. She had been married, and it was a very short marriage. And in the Catholic Church, her mother really pressured her to get annulled. Her mom is very devoutly Catholic, mm-hmm. and so she really pushed my wife to get her marriage annulled, to do all this stuff. And really, she said, she went before the annulment board, and it was all these priests, and most of their questions were about what was your ex-husband's and your sex life like. It wasn't about how you got treated or any of that stuff. She said it was just the most bizarre thing, and that really set her off.
Yeah.
And so then I started to realize there was a crack, mm-hmm. and I doubled down on my religious beliefs, and I converted her.
Okay.
And I sort of brought myself back in to be, Church of Christ, good Christian guy, blah, blah, blah.
Did you dial back on the drinking?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Dial back on the drink, dial back on the swearing. Like I realized, I was like, okay, I got to do the right thing here. If we're going to lead a good Christian life, we got to be a good Christian couple together.
Okay, so you see the crack and double down.
That's right.
Weird. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely, right? And I still remember I think, I can't even remember if we were engaged yet or not. I remember having a fight over the phone with her, and we were like, oh, if we're going to have kids, who's going to raise them? Whose church are they going to go to? And she's like, well, yeah, it was like, well, I said, I am not going to marry any girl and have my kids go to some heathen Catholic church. And she's, and eventually she was like, okay, fine, you can take the kids to church and blah, blah, blah. I'll just do my Catholic thing. And probably 4 to 6 months later, she was baptized.
Okay. Now, did you guys end up having kids?
No, we're both infertile, and as a matter of fact, we did quite a bit of investigation.
Wow.
Yeah, like we ended up going in, like there's a fertility clinic where we live, and basically once they sort of figured out what was wrong, they basically said, please go away. We can't help you.
Wow. Was that a heartbreaker for either of you?
Oh, it was devastating for both of us.
Wow.
It was, well, and I'll be honest, Cass, so here's part of the thing. As a teenager, right, so I grew up understanding what I was to be the child of a single mom.
Yeah.
I was scared shitless about knocking some girl up.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I didn't want to have sex because I'm worried I'm going to get some girl pregnant. I didn't want to have sex because God's going to shoot a lightning bolt down and blow me up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have all of this stuff, and then to find out afterwards, it was like, son of a bitch.
Right. So did you carry some of that into your wedding bed?
I don't know if I did or not.
Well, you were free by then, maybe.
Yeah, I was freed by then. I mean, eventually my wife and I did have sex before we got married. It was like, but we tried to keep everything all under the table. It was like, oh, don't let anybody find out.
That makes it kind of fun, the taboo-ness of keeping it your secret.
Oh yeah, and I still remember. It's like, okay, she'd been baptized. It was like, okay, once you're baptized, like, we're not going to have sex anymore. We're not going to have sex. This is going to be like, we can't do this, right?
And then I did the same thing. Yeah.
Did you really?
Oh yeah.
Wow. I never had that problem.
Good for you, Bob.
Well, it's you're human beings. I mean, this is what you do.
Well, it is, and that's one of those things that really frustrated me. And part of all that deconversion thing, it's like you start thinking about all of this stuff. It's like you're hormonal. You've got all these urges and all this stuff, and God's basically saying, "Don't do that. You got to wait for marriage. That's the only place where this is acceptable."
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, it's more than just don't do that. And this was one of the things the preacher yelled into the megaphone yesterday was over and over again, shame on you.
Shame on
He
you.
was
Right.
wagging his finger at all of us for being human.
Yeah.
In the Church of Christ, and I'm sure it is in many other denominations, every sin is equal, right? Doesn't matter whether you lie, you steal, you cheat, or you have sex. Every sin is equal. God treats them equally.
Isn't that that's a Pauline thing, right? I mean, he said if you've broken one part of the law, you've broken the whole law.
Yeah, that's
something like that.
Catholic Church though they have venial and mortal and others, sins.
Well,
Okay.
But I'll be honest though, Bob, every church treats sin differently because you can lie, but in the Church of Christ, if you have sex, holy crap.
Yeah, it's a bigger deal, and they just give lip service to that other doctrine.
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
And
It goes back to Paul. Is that why?
it does.
If they were adhering to Paul, they would equate all of them.
Yeah.
It goes back to social and cultural pressures.
Wow.
Well, it goes back to I think it's in 1 Corinthians 6. Man, it's been so long since I've read my Bible, I've forgotten passages now.
Good.
It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, good for you.
But I think it was in 1 Corinthians 6. It's like if you have a sexual sin, it's a sin against your own body. It's different than just stealing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a sin against your own body, and your body is supposed to be a temple, and you're supposed to unite with God and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But
isn't that weird?
Was it the Catholics that defined the 7 deadly sins?
It may have
because it's not biblical.
No, it's extra biblical kind of stuff.
I thought it was. Well, see, I think. I'm trying to remember where the hell it is now, but I thought there were a list of sins, and I know it's in the Old Testament of, there's 6 sins that God hates and 7 that He absolutely despises, kind of thing. Oh, and I can't remember where that is in the Old Testament.
It's in Proverbs.
Proverbs, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, and the weird thing is too. I mean, the idea of the Christian religion is your soul, your that immaterial part is the part that's important. So what's the big deal about sex with your corporal part, with your corporeal
That's kind of
part.
Gnosticism, isn't it? Or the opposite of Gnosticism?
Well, actually, yeah, that is a Gnostic idea. Like, well, let's have sex. What the hell? Because our our souls are the ones that we have to keep clean here.
Yeah.
So it's just this strange way of looking at things, isn't it? Very first century. Very, very strange.
Well, if you want to know the answer is that the Bible also says that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And would you take that body and unite it with a prostitute?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So human shaming is a big deal. I want to touch on this for a second because, one of the things that Bob first said when he said, I didn't have a problem with premarital sex. I didn't have any guilt around it. I didn't have to sneak around. It was just being human. And what does end up translating into the wedding bed for Christians and then eventually for post-Christians is it lingers. And that if you have this sense of shame around sexuality, masturbation is still a difficult thing for post-Christians. Even like exploratory sex, like if there was who were we talking to? I don't think he'd mind me saying, but I think Dave Warnock said he didn't have a blowjob until he was 40. Because that would be out of God's will.
Yeah.
God invades the wedding bed like a motherfucker.
I don't think I actually even had a problem with that once I got into the wedding bed. That was basically like, woohoo, gloves are off. I can have as much sex as I want, and nobody cares. Yeah. Right?
Well, but don't they? But isn't there you can have as much sex as you want, but it's only got to be a certain way.
Well, he's saying he was free of that, but there are Christians who adhere to that. For sure.
The man on top and the woman be quiet.
I like the John Mayer song, Your Body is a Wonderland. It's time to play. It's the playground. And it is, honestly, let's just come out and say it. The human experience, especially from a purely secular, scientific, naturalist perspective, literally one of the greatest things about being alive is orgasm.
It's good.
It's actually good for the body.
Yeah.
That it promotes softer skin and all kinds of things. If you're regularly orgasming, your body is staying calibrated with itself.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Maybe that's why I'm a little itchy. I don't know. I can't tell you.
So anyway, I just want to point out the human shaming. Let's get back to your story. Have you ever met your biological father?
Yes, I have. I met him when I was about 21. Again, really, big time hippie dude.
Now, was it the kind of thing where your mom loved him and he abandoned her, or was it what was it?
So I know that she had a real crush on him in high school, kind of thing, and then he got her knocked up, and then he fucked off.
Left.
Oh yeah, he left as soon as she found out she was pregnant. And the funny thing is that he then went and proceeded to knock up my mom's best friend.
Wow.
As well. And so I've met that other sibling as well once or twice.
Okay, that's your half sibling, and
that's another half sibling. So I have a sibling that I grew up with as well.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So
wait, you grew up with but post grandma.
So post grandma, I have a sister that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And then probably about 20 years after, or 20 something years after I was born, I finally met my other sister through my biological father.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, is your grandmother passed away?
Yeah, she passed away 2016, the spring of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So when you went to her funeral, you were already an unbeliever.
I was really, really struggling. I ended up actually officiating over the funeral.
Wow. Is that by her request?
It was by request of the family because they didn't want to have a big deal. She hadn't been to services in the Lutheran church in probably 4 or 5 years. She was in a nursing home or in an extended care facility. Uh-huh. And I had been so close to her growing up as a kid. I was the son she never had.
Right.
She had 3 daughters.
Yeah. So when you're up there officiating, did you break down?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay.
I totally lost it. I mean, my grandmother was my world to me, and she still is. I mean, she's really more of a mother to me than my mother. I mean, I know my mom will never hear this. It would absolutely devastate her, but she does know that too, that my grandmother was a mom to me.
Yeah, she has to.
Oh, yeah. And she always looked after me. And my parents bought a duplex, and my grandmother lived on one side and we lived on the other. So, and that was probably when I was about 10 or 11, they did that. And so I always had my grandmother close by for many years, and she really looked after me and helped me in a lot of things.
That's beautiful.
Oh, yeah. And like I say, she really was, if there was an epitome of what a Christian woman would be, to me, it was her.
Yeah.
She was never judgmental. She never said an unkind word about anybody.
Yeah. Well, see, this could be where you double down. And once you see the cracks and you double down, one of the motivators or the compulsion would be that figure in your life, your grandmother. It's like that's just one more thing that you don't want to betray.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I don't think I didn't want to leave. I wanted to leave the church. I was having a lot of doubts probably 2 or 3 or 4 years prior to her passing away.
Right.
And I think you're right. It's probably some of that doubling down. It's like, I can't do this until grandma's passed. Because and she had some form of dementia. Not that she would have ever understood that I'm leaving the church, but whatever, right? It's just that psychological thing in the back of your head.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one of the things that we relate to as ex-Christians and why it was hard to give up, don't say I lost my faith, I cut it out of my bones with knives and steel. I mean, is the need for it to be true.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there were many points in time in my adult life or young adult life where I needed it to be true because I needed to just hang on to something.
Yeah.
But, so just going back to my grandma's passing and my mom's disappointment with me leaving church, part of the whole thing about the Church of Christ is there is only one true church, right? So everybody else that's out there
is lost,
right? And so my grandmother growing up, Baptist, becoming Lutheran, and then dying, she's eternally lost because she didn't get baptized the right way. She didn't go to the right church. And my mom, who is still in the Church of Christ, and that was part of the thing that broke for me. It was like, how can this woman who was this good
there you
go to hell? Like, that's fucking horrible.
Fuck that God.
Fuck that God. Well, exactly. I know you said it many times, Cass, that I want to be better than the God that I'm supposed to believe in, because if there's a God like that, like what father would treat his children like that?
Well, actually, I don't know if you meant it this way, but I always say I didn't want to be better than the God that I served. I would never bow the knee to a God that wasn't at least as good as I am.
Yeah.
And none of these gods measured up. I'm better.
Yeah.
And that's very disappointing.
Yeah, well, it is.
You can't even be as good as me, and I'm a human being with flaws.
You made me this way, like, really?
Yeah.
But so, and I had that discussion with my mom, and my mom, and I'll get this part of the story too, is that my mom has had a stroke, and she's so she does have some cognitive deficits, and she's very emotional now. And so when I said to her, I said, you have to understand, Mom, that because grandma didn't die in the church, this is what we believe. And that's that cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, and so my mom was like, well, I just can't believe that. It's like, well, I can't either. So I can't adhere to this teaching anymore because this is bullshit.
Wow.
And my mom's devastated. She's like, I know I'm going to see her in heaven. And it's like, by the teaching that we've been taught, you can't believe that.
Yeah. And it forces her to choose.
Oh, it does. And so, she's doubled down, and that's like, for about 6 or 8 months after I told her that we'd left, she always, I'm praying for you guys and blah, blah, blah. But she's confronted me once or twice since, but nothing horrible.
Yeah.
Like she's never tried to shame me or anything like that. She just.
Now, wait, I thought when you sat down and talked to her and you told her this thing about grandmas in hell, that she chose to believe that she was going to see grandma again, and then yet you said she doubled down. Which is it?
Well, she's doubled down just in her belief in what she's taught, but she's still accepting the fact that grandma's going to be in heaven.
Yeah, so she's cherry picking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, good for her.
Or actually, not really even cherry picking, deciding which to believe, but going to this place where you say, well, some things we're not supposed to understand. Or, it doesn't make any sense, ways, but yes, but it'll be fine.
In the end, God will do the right thing.
Yeah, or something like that. Of course, that's, where does that come from? I mean, I don't know what kind of theology that is, but still.
Yeah.
So, kind of a left field question here, Paul. Have you ever seen the movie Sunshine Cleaning?
I can't remember.
Amy Adams and
Amy Adams.
who's the other girl? Emily Blunt.
Emily Blunt.
They
Ellen
are
Arkin.
sisters, and they end up starting a cleaning service that cleans up after crime scenes. Or
Oh yeah, I think I may have seen this. I'll have to download it because I'm heading to China Tuesday, so it'll be something to watch on the plane.
okay,
Oh, great.
Well, the reason I ask is that Amy Adams had a little boy out of wedlock,
Right.
and the grandfather, played by Alan Arkin, or maybe it wasn't the grandfather. No, it was the other sister. The boy they were sitting in the van one time, and he's sitting in the middle between them, and other kids at the school had called him a bastard.
Oh, right.
Right.
And the sister said, well, you are a bastard, and just kind of helped him own it.
Right.
And instead of, but I'm just wondering, you get enough shame from the Bible as far as the shame of being a human, and you carry that. Was there any shame for you as far as, you being born in sin or anything like that?
I don't know. I don't think I ever thought of it like that. I mean, I always wondered where's Dad,
Yeah.
but
there wasn't a cultural shaming of you.
no, not that I remember.
Yeah. So the Canadian zeitgeist seem,
Yeah.
we all know that it's not near as saturated in religiosity as where Bob and I live. But yet, we do hear stories like this where there's some there. But I think you'd say they're the minority, right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, so there's a small pocket where I live that's there's a very strong sort of, we'll call it a religious Bible belt. There's a lot of Mormons here.
Wow.
And I mean, I even tried to date a Mormon once when I was in high school, and that was kind of funny because she took me to the Mormon seminary. They always have a thing every day at lunch for the kids. It's basically indoctrination, right? And she knew I was a Christian. And I said to her when we were going in there, I said, so are they going to put a salad bowl on my head with electrodes and try and convert me? She's like, no.
That's the Scientologist.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Well, and she ultimately probably broke up because she can't be with a non-Mormon, right?
Yeah, no, we didn't last long. It was, I don't think it ever really developed into much. We just sort of, yeah.
So you and your wife, how long you been married?
We've been married, it'll be 24 years this year.
Oh,
Wow.
my.
Hey, that's great.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
And you have pets?
Yes, we have a border collie puppy. She's about 5 months old.
Okay. We were talking about your infertility.
Right.
I mean, is it still sting when you see other couples with a baby in a stroller, or?
It depends on the couple. So some of these couples that seem to have like 6 kids and they're on like all they seem to do is reproduce like rabbits.
Yeah.
And yet they have no financial means or anything to support their family, and it's like that's where it really burns.
Yeah.
Sure.
Was that a crack in your faith? I mean, God's injustice of like giving 6 kids to people who don't deserve it.
Somewhat. It somewhat was. I mean, the crack that really started it all for me was my mom's stroke.
Okay.
And that was like 10 or 12 years ago now. Actually, it was almost 12 years ago this February. And just everything that surrounded what happened with her and her stroke. And I mean, my wife and I had been very active in our local church. I taught Sunday morning class at the church. She taught Bible classes for the kids. I preached occasionally. Like, we were very active, very, very active members in our church. And then my mom had her stroke. And this was shortly after my parents divorced, which in the Church of Christ is like, wow.
Big deal.
Well, that's a huge deal for divorce. And then she had been actually traveling with her new boyfriend in the Dominican, and she had a stroke while she was there. And so we had to have her emergency airlifted home.
Wow. Jeez.
In dealing with that, I ended up spending a lot of time away from the church, traveling. And we did go to church whenever we traveled to whatever city we were in. So I tried to help out because my mom and my grandmother still lived together in the same duplex. And so I was the good son that went down to do all the yard work, to do all the stuff for them. And my wife went and she cooked meals all the time for my mom because at the time when she got out of hospital, she was still fairly disabled and couldn't do a lot of things. And so a year of traveling probably every second weekend to go and see my mom and my grandma to help them out, we were exhausted.
Sure.
And the thing was, is the people in our local congregation were like, why are you guys away so much? Like, you need to be here. You're forsaking the assembly. That's one of the that Hebrews 10:25. I fucking hate that passage.
How do you really feel?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, lay it out there.
So the Church of Christ is very much, we believe what the Bible says. We're silent where the Bible is silent. We speak where the Bible speaks. And then there's all of these necessary inference things. And so one of the things that the Church of Christ is always against for so many denominations is cherry picking one passage and making a doctrine out of it. Mm-hmm. So that a lot of people from the Church of Christ make fun of the Mormons because the Mormons baptize for the dead. Mm-hmm. There's a passage in first or 2 Corinthians about baptism for the dead. I can't remember where it is. But yet the Church of Christ does the same thing. They take a passage like Hebrews 10:25, and it's like, forsaking the assembly is blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, read the rest of the context of the whole fucking book, you idiots.
Yeah, but they would say that one of the reasons you fell away was you got away from the fellowship, and the fellowship is where you stay charged up and all that.
Well, but the funny thing was, Bob and Cass, is that neither one of us really had that fellowship, because it's really hard when you're an infertile couple and all the people that are in the church that are your age are having kids and they've got family time together, and we never got included in a lot of things. We were always hospitable. We always had people in our home for dinners. Tried to do things with people, but nothing was ever reciprocated. So, part of being in a church is having community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of is annoying. I mean, here you are going every other weekend up to see your mom doing, the grass and what have you. And what's the church doing?
They question your priorities.
Yeah, why aren't you here with us tithing or whatever it is they want? Tithing. But the point is, why aren't they helping too? What's going on here?
Well, absolutely. And so, about a year after we'd been going through all this stuff, we'd had a gospel meeting with a guy that we got to know from somewhere down in the States. He'd come up, and he was a super nice fellow, very compassionate, very empathetic. And he came through about a year later. He took one look at me and went, "You are exhausted. Like, what is going on with you?" And yet nobody in our own local congregation had said a thing. Mm-hmm. All they were like was, where were you? And it was like, I think that was sort of where the first crack started.
Yeah. There's been several first cracks now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
A lot of cracks.
But you love that. The intuition to recognize when somebody, that's, and I'll tell you the other thing that you mentioned that stings. And Mindy and I have felt this, is that we have people over. We really are proactive at building relationships.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And when people don't reciprocate, I know my wife takes that very personal.
Yeah, totally.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah,
what's wrong with me? Really? Wow.
And that's the thing. Is the local church that we were a part of here had a large Hispanic group, and my wife and I have done a lot of traveling in the Caribbean and Mexico on vacation. So we've kind of gotten to understand some of the Spanish or the Latino culture. Yeah. And so we really tried to be that bridge between the English-speaking and the Latino group. Mm-hmm. And, eventually that got thrown on its heels. We, when we started missing all these services and stuff, the one Latino guy that took over as the preacher of the church got really quite irate about things. And we were trying to build a new building, and he basically said, you have no input to this. You're not a good Christian. You're not here enough. I was like, wow. I went to bat for you so many times, dude, and tried to save your bacon. And now you're turning on me? Like, wow.
Yeah. All right. So today, you're out, and you've been out for a while. Your wife is on the same journey, even though she doesn't want to talk about it. It's kind of like an apatheist.
Yeah. Well, she's actually listening to your podcast. It took a little while, but she's actually started to listen to your podcast. So we, when we walk the dog, we talk about some of the discussions you had, and I'm getting her to start to listen to some of the Ryan Bell podcasts as well.
Yeah, when they come out.
Yeah.
I'm a little jab at my buddy Ryan there, because he puts one out every 6 months or something. It seems like.
Yeah, and I'm a little disappointed about that too, because he had a really good streak going, and then it's been going in spurts and sputters, but. Hopefully he can keep that going now that he's sort of back at her.
Yeah, I love the tone of Ryan's show. It's very different than mine. And it's a little more intellectual. And
well, and I'll be honest, Cass, when I first started listening to Ryan, it was like, oh, okay, I can really relate to this guy and blah, blah, blah. And then I heard your interview, And I'm listening, and it's like, oh, he's cussing and swearing. It's like, oh, I don't know if I can handle this. This is a little too intense for me. But I've grown to absolutely love your podcast now.
Oh,
It's
thank
like,
you.
oh, I can't wait for the next one to come out. And it's like, oh, this is...
Oh, well, thanks.
Did you already listen to Joy's?
No, I haven't yet.
Oh, that is the quintessential show, man.
Yeah, you got to listen to that.
I mean, we've had some great ones, and I don't want to rate them or anything because they're all just wonderful human beings telling their story. In fact, going back to Nobody Wants to Hear Us Talk About That, that's the subtitle of our show, is that we talk to people that you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. But Joy just really, that story moved me. I listened to that show like 3 times myself just because it was just so powerful. Anyway.
Yeah. And I've seen the notes. I'm curious to see what toxic things that she went through versus the toxic stuff that my wife and I experienced towards the end of our deconversion.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to be very different because that her main source of pain was her patriarchal husband.
Yeah.
And you're not that guy.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it's really stunning. I mean, it stops you when she says some of the stuff she does.
She had physiological reactions while talking about it. Like, that's how much trauma is stored in her body. I mean,
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So you say you go to China, you were here and there. What do you do for a living?
So I'm a product tester. So I work for a company that makes, this will kind of out me a bit, but I work for a company that makes interactive touch panels.
Okay, I don't know what
so-
that is. You mean like when you go to McDonald's or something and you can order your food, like push buttons?
kind of like that. But these go into the educational market space.
Oh, okay. It's cool. All right. So you're all over the place, and that's good.
Yeah, and so I'm going there this week to help one of our suppliers do some testing.
going where?
China.
China.
Oh, that's right. You already said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been there before, or?
Yeah, I've been to another part of China, so this time I'm going a little. It's close to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does your wife work?
Yes, she does.
What's she do? Are you
So
gonna,
she works. She
No,
works
wait.
at health.
Let me ask you this. You just said you're going to out yourself, and are we going by your full name here, or I mean, like?
No,
Okay.
no. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll go by Freddy and Betty.
Wait, we've called you several times in this show.
Uh,
We can
well,
take it
well-
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll take it out. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Okay, Freddy and Betty. All right.
yeah, yeah. Just because my wife has worked in healthcare and she's worked in mental health,
Yeah.
and so if there's anybody that's, yeah,
Okay. Sounds good.
that was her concern. I seriously doubt that anybody from our local church that we used to go to would ever listen to this, and if they do, they should really listen hard and start to think about the shit they're believing in.
Yeah. No, I agree. Absolutely.
Because the congregation we were in was just so toxic. At the end, it was just so toxic. It was just not a good place to be.
So how do you figure they stay in it? I mean, are they can't be. I mean,
It's that fear. It's that fear of I'm going to hell. And I mean, for some people, there were so many people in that church that were all family, and so it's very much that if you leave the church, they're going to shame you and they are going to disown you. Yeah. And we saw that. There was a fellow that was very active in the church. His son got involved in drugs and alcohol, ended up going to jail, and he and his then wife basically disowned him and had absolutely nothing to do with him until he came back. Mm-hmm. And eventually, sadly, this poor kid, because of some of the stuff that happened to him, he committed suicide. Mm. And it was like, wow.
Yeah, he probably had depression. Are they anti-medicine there or anything?
Well, so it's funny you say that. So the preacher there, I'm sure his wife suffers from bipolar or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's not funny. I shouldn't laugh.
Well,
no, I know what you mean, though.
But one minute it's like, well, you need to let God take care of you, and the next minute it's like, well, you need to go to the hospital and get help. And it's like, well, what is it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, and that again is part of that death by 1,000 cuts. With my wife working in mental health, people with schizophrenia, you have no choice. So how does God basically condemns somebody because of how he made them?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like, and that's one of those things. Again, it's like, that's again another crack. It's like, well, how the hell do you reconcile that?
So you ventured out and probably step by step, you started maybe even reading or watching YouTubes or listening to podcasts that were a little bit on the perimeter of your comfort zone.
Oh, absolutely. Like there's a like PBS or NPR or whatever in Canada, there's a broadcast network called CBC.
Yeah, sure.
And they've got a podcast, or not a podcast, but a radio show called Tapestry. And they interview all kinds of different people from every different walk of life and faith. And I had heard a fellow that they changed his voice, and I don't know, maybe it was you, maybe it was Ryan Bell. I don't know who the hell it was. But he was on there as a preacher and saying, I don't believe this stuff anymore. I've done all this searching, and I'm listening to this, and I'm sitting in the cafeteria having my breakfast at the office, and I'm in tears because I'm in the same boat. I'm thinking the same thing. Like, I'm bawling, listening to this guy's story about how he wants to leave, but he's kind of talked to his wife, and he knows that if he leaves his faith behind, he's got no job. His wife's going to leave him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the same thing. And my wife wasn't on the same page at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like what am I going to do? This is the way I feel.
Yeah.
And then I heard the interview. She interviewed Greta Vosberg.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Greta's great.
And that was a great interview as well. And I remember thinking, well, how can you be a United ministry and you don't believe in God? Like that was a complete mind blown. Mm-hmm. And then interviewing Ryan Bell. And I remember listening to his thing. He's like, well, I'm going to take a year away from God. And at the time, I'm still in it, but I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get out of this. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, of course, if you leave God for a year, you're not going to be a part of this anymore. And then listening to and finding his website, listening to his stuff, and then, finding your guys' podcast as well. So listening to all this stuff and then starting to do a lot of my own investigation. It's like we were studying about the Egyptian Exodus and their travel through the wilderness for 40 years. And then you start doing archaeological, like finding research papers, and it's like, wait a minute, there's not a fucking shred of evidence
that ever happened. Yeah.
2 million people ever walked away from Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you start to look, and it's like, well, if you lost that many people, the pyramids would have never been built. Like, you start doing all this other archaeological research, and it's like, and we had been told, our preacher at one point in time said, well, if there's one thing that's wrong, then it's all wrong. And I'm like, yeah. You're fucking right, dude.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, what made me ask that was that we were talking about having a disease that God gives you and then condemns you for having it, which is the sin nature. Mm-hmm. Yep. And one of the first persons that I ever heard say that, and again, was outside my comfort zone that I let myself watch and eventually, and that's Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So did you ever have any exposure to him?
I have a bunch of his books. I need to sit down and read them. I'm so busy.
Yeah,
he's great.
That's
he's
fine.
great. You'll like Hitchens. He's very good. And Sam Harris too.
Yeah.
Have you read
Right.
Sam?
Yep.
Yeah. The first one I think is the best one he's written.
Sam's gotten a lot of slack lately for being a kind of anti-social justice warrior. You know,
I don't think that's true, but that's how he's seen. Yeah.
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 Well, one of Sam Harris's book that really, ironically, all his, The End of Faith and all that.
Well, The End of Faith is the best, I think.
Yeah.
That's the best one.
But he wrote a book called Lying.
Lying, yeah.
And little book, and my gosh, I've always been somebody who really aspires to be honest. And it stretched me, even though I was a person already devoted to honesty. It was like, oh my gosh. It was just really good. So anyway, that's a fringe book there, but getting the whole honesty thing on this note, I want to just point out to all our listeners, and we take comfort in this community, the ex-Christian community, that there's a little subculture in this, that people on the outside, and especially our family members who are disappointed in us, they have no idea how much the cost of getting honest cost us.
Oh, no.
They're literally want us to come back, and we are at a place where we can't believe. It's hard to believe we ever fell for that.
Well, and it's funny you say that because so one of the guys I'm really good friends with at work, he's known about my journey. He and I have talked for many years. I've worked with him off and on for almost the last 20 years. He's very much agnostic. Mm-hmm. He's kind of disappointed, if anything, I've gone a little more atheist.
Yeah.
But he totally gets it, and he's totally cool with it. But yet I work with a lot of guys that are very staunchly atheist, and I would never, ever tell them I was a part of religion.
Yeah, because they would go, oh, you're an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this one guy's like, oh, they're just a bunch of fucking sky fairy believers. Like, these Americans are idiots for voting a guy like Trump in. It's like, okay, I'm not going to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We concur.
Yes.
Yeah, that's tough.
I think that's a moving story. You're sitting there in the cafeteria, you're hearing a preacher who's still in the pulpit confess under voice recognition, change, that he's losing it, and you so related, and you kind of saw, the fear would be like, I'm going to lose my wife, and I'm going to lose everything.
Sure,
it's just very.
Saw yourself.
It's ominous.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, it is. And even so, I know I contacted you, Cass. I know we spoke.
It was about a year ago.
Yeah, about a year ago, and had a chat, because I know when we had walked away from the church. My wife and I both had enough. Things had just gotten so toxic.
Yeah,
there was just always threats from the pulpit of, well, if you don't do what we say, we're going to come talk to you and we'll kick you out.
Yeah, threats.
And so, oh yeah. Well, so we were doing this whole. There was always this campaign. There was all kinds of problems within the church. There was a young girl that had been abused by her uncle, and he ended up going to jail for it. And everybody rallied around the uncle.
Yep.
And yet this poor girl had been sort of tossed to the side. And when she was struggling, they were all condemning her for not being in services and it was like, wow, wrong way around, guys. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like,
that's just
support the victim in this. Like, what's the matter with you people?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's just all these stupid things. And so we knew there was issues in the church, and they were having this whole campaign of, we're going to go out Sunday or Saturday mornings and hand out flyers and door knock. And my wife and I are like, we can't be a part of this. Like, we got to fix everything internally first.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're away a lot. I mean, my wife, somewhere in between in the last 5 years, lost her father. And so she's trying to help her mom, and they're back in our hometown as well. So it's another compounding thing. We're away again. And so we often missed a lot of these hand out the pamphlets things. And then came the threat from the pulpit of, if you guys don't start attending this all the time, we're going to come talk to you. The men of the church are going to come talk to you, and we're going to kick you out if you don't buck up.
Yeah.
And we'd had enough of that. It was just like, you know what? This is just utter bullshit.
Very cultish.
I would be gone. I wouldn't go. But if somebody tries that on me, come on.
Well, and that
no
was the
way.
thing. So we were gone. We'd had enough, and my wife had some experience as well that caused her to start to lose her faith with her father passing away. We'd been traveling. We were in Australia, and we got a phone call in the middle of the night. Her father had passed away. And he had been ill. We kind of knew when we were going that we were at risk that we may not see him again. But when we got back, my wife had actually traveled to Central America with one of these Hispanic families to help preach down there at a ladies' retreat. And when we got back, we got zero support.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, all these things going on, and this you're right, Bob, very cultish.
Yeah. Well, the death of 1,000 cuts comes up a lot on the show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Here's another thing, is that the outside world, especially our Christian friends and family, and your mom did this. She basically said, you've had a bad experience if you'll just come to our church.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the truth is that many times, we ex-Christians, part of our problem was we did have conflicts with the church. They were political. Yep. A lot of us maybe not saw it. We can see it now. Yeah. And that's the phrase, the world is happening exactly as it would be if there were no God. And one of the ways that translates is you're looking at the church, who's supposed to be a city on a hill.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be perfect.
At least in contrast to the world, we're supposed to have our shit together.
Right.
And when you see, the problems in the human relational problems that are just exactly, if not worse, than the outside world, you should begin to question, maybe we're just making shit up. And the other thing is the upside downness of what he just said. When you got it backwards, you're favoring the predator here.
Yeah.
There's a lot that they have backwards, and here's where it comes from. I think the relationship to God is foremost.
Yep, totally.
The relationship to other human beings is very secondary, if not way down on the list. So when that guy, if he even showed any penitence, then they're okay with how he treated another human being because he's right. The right relationship, that being with God, is in place, and so we're aligned with that, and so we approve. It happens all the time. All these guys, that's one of the reasons they give Trump a pass. Yeah. Is that, that was, God forgives, and so I'm going to forgive. And they feel like it's a fucking virtue to let people off the hook.
Well, and we rally about we always rally around the redemptive story, right?
Right.
We pulled him back from the brink.
Prodigal son.
Yeah, it's in our zeitgeist as a human species to rally around the person that was lost and come back.
Poor sinner.
Yeah, and if we could see that, if we would see that in Trump, that he was lost and he did the wrong thing and he repents and he's very sorry and he's very sad.
They'll see what they want to see.
But he clearly doesn't care.
Well, he used to be pro-life or pro-choice, and now he's pro-life, so they see that as penitence.
Oh, there you go. See.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is the accountability. This is a big word in Christianity, and they have accountability groups, and it has a lot to do with masturbation and sexuality. But again, what they're working on is that you're accountable to God, and so we're going to focus on that. One of the things that is entirely lacking and very detrimental to my personal life, and I think anybody who's involved in it, is the lack of accountability that we have as human beings that the church takes off of us. So we're not accountable for the ecology. I mean, for the ecosystem.
Sure.
God's in charge of that. And
don't get me started on that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What do you know about that?
Well, so I'm traveling for work in New Zealand about 4 years ago now. And being the good Christian guy I was supposed to be at this time, I'm struggling. I'm really, really struggling. And I go to this church in New Zealand. I did the right thing to try and find a quote-unquote conservative church because there's lots of liberal churches around. And I went out for lunch with the preacher and his wife. And growing up where I am, I have definitely seen climate change happen. Winters are not the way they used to be when I was 5. It's way warmer here, right? So climate change is happening. I can see it in my lifetime. So I'm driving in their car, and the preacher says to me, he said, what do you believe in climate change? And I went, it's happening. And his wife went, oh, you're one of those. And I was like, I will never forget her tone or her voice. And right then and there, that was it. The dam was open. The dam burst. It was like, I can't be a part of these fucking morons.
Yeah.
They will not accept science.
Yeah, it's just horrible.
Wow.
Well, and even she said, it's like, well, don't you think that if there were 10,000 cows, or 10 million cows in the earth, that God would make sure everything was okay?
Yeah.
It's like,
Because what is ethane or
Methane.
Methane.
Yeah, methane from cows.
yeah, methane gas is like,
a major cause.
And I have several friends from high school that are PhDs in environmental science and whatnot. And I talk to them on Facebook about some of this stuff, and they provide me with all kinds of information. It's like here's global warming. Here's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just look around. Just be, and that's another thing. And I'm pissed off at the media for this. Every time they have an opportunity to say this has something to do with global warming, they don't say it.
Yeah.
No.
Afraid of losing listeners.
Yeah. I mean, but you've got to make the connection to help people understand this is why it's snowing where it doesn't snow before.
Yeah.
This is why, this is why the tides are so high. This is why, those kind of things.
Well, and I know this is one of the words for intellectuals is brights.
Yeah.
Okay. The brights.
And I know that the Christian subculture has a perspective of atheists that you think you're smarter than us.
Yeah.
And you know what? this whole deal, like in order to stay in the Christian tribe or even the conservative side, you have to dumb yourself down. And I think, you said a second ago, you were talking about your trip to New Zealand, and you said, quote, I was really struggling. And I think you've said that like 7 different stages of your life. And one of the things that Bob gets so frustrated with on these shows is that, you've spent your life wrestling. And, and I know that many of us ex-Christians look back on our lives and we want those years back that we spent in turmoil. And and even then, what we did, here's what we did to make ourselves feel good about that, or at least righteous about it, is the word Israel means wrestle with God.
Yep.
And so when we found ourselves wrestling with God, well, that means we're a child of God. We're one of the chosen few. This is what you do. You wrestle.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Jesus
and it's that whole thing of, God disciplines those who he loves.
Yeah. Chastise, yeah.
Chastise, right? It's like, Okay.
Yeah, so even when bad shit happens, you can find the silver lining in it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's it to me. It's just
It's sad.
It is.
I feel for you. All this needless pain. That's what I think. All
Much
this.
ado about nothing.
Yeah, all this time and pain. Wow.
And that's the thing is, and I told my mom that the last time that we talked about, my wife and I walking away from the church. I said, Mom, I'll be honest. I'm living authentic me for the first time in my life.
Yeah. How'd that go for her?
And she just kind of went, well, I really wish you'd come back to the church. It's like,
Yeah, she
no,
didn't hear it.
she didn't hear. She didn't hear what, and I think part of the thing is too, is that she walked away from the church when her and my dad divorced and started going out with another guy. And when she had her stroke, we never pressured her to come back to church. I have never been one to browbeat somebody about trying to teach them about God or Christianity or whatever.
Yeah.
I always tried to teach by example, and that's part of how I won over my wife to convert to Christianity, was just by leading by example.
Probably to lead her out too.
Well, to help lead her out, but so that was part of my mom's thing too. It's like, well, but you brought me back, you brought me back to the church.
Yeah.
So why are you leaving? It's like, because 10, 12 years later, I can't handle this crap anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally relate to that because my sisters, we were all raised kind of cultural Christians in Oklahoma. Everybody was a Christian, even though they didn't live like it. And I doubled. I mean, I became zealous, and I became one of those, that said, your life has to reflect that you're a Christian. You don't get to just wear the badge.
Right.
And my zeal led my sisters to go deep into evangelicalism, whereas before they were just lukewarm Christians.
Yeah.
And then I leave,
Yeah.
and it's very confusing for them.
Oh yeah. Well, and my sister that I grew up with, she's not been religious at all. I mean, she's probably more, I guess. She's what's the word you guys used to use? Apatheistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I love. I love that phrase. Like, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the healthiest place is you can get to that, where you're no longer angry at a God that doesn't exist.
Yeah. But so she walked away when she turned 18. She moved in with her boyfriend. And, she's now living with a guy that she's been with for, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they've got a lovely daughter. And I have a great relationship with her now. And when I came out to her last summer that my wife and I had left, she's like, oh, thank God. She's like, I'm so glad because I always felt you guys are so judgmental. I'm like, well, no, we tried not to be. She's like, no, you have no idea how much I had to try and hold things together and compartmentalize who we were while you guys came to visit. Mm-hmm. So my dad, during his prostate cancer treatment, my sister and I were out helping him and my mom because my parents eventually got back together. That's another bizarre thing, but we will, yeah.
Okay. It happens.
I think with my mom having her stroke, she tried a couple of boyfriends and they went, yeah, I'm not going to deal with this. But my dad still took her back, but whatever. Anyhow, my sister's, she's so happy that we're out. She's like, oh, I don't have to worry about you guys being so judgmental. And then when I was out helping with my dad and his prostate cancer, she said to me, she goes, I would love nothing more than to sit down and smoke a doobie with you.
So did you?
No.
What about a drink? Have a drink,
Yeah. Oh, she doesn't drink.
Okay.
I drink now, though.
What do you drink?
I love craft beer, so my favorite thing are porters and stouts.
Oh, me too. I like the darks. Yes.
Well, I find they taste like coffee, and I love coffee.
Yeah,
right?
me too.
And you can get some of these stouts now that are infused with coffee. It's like, this is the best of both worlds. It's beer and coffee together. Like, how much better can you get?
I know, it's great, huh?
And then I do like small batch whiskeys and stuff. There's a few distillers that are starting up now, like they're craft distillers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I bought a whiskey last year, and then we've also traveled to Cuba, and they have some really good rums down there that are incredibly cheap in Cuba, but holy crap, are they expensive here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very true.
Well, let's come into the home stretch. I know that one of your hobbies, I think the photo that we're using for this episode is you on a bicycle in the mountains.
Yes. So I absolutely love cycling. And I know that cycling for me has been an escape, and it probably was an escape that started in my teenage years. just to help deal with the troubles of teenage life.
Yeah. The
To just sort of-
solitude.
The solitude, to be in your own head. And it's hilarious to see or to read how many people that I know you've interviewed who have taken up cycling and as a result of cycling have left the faith. It's like it's the devil's sport. It's like, oh yeah, this is fucking awesome, man. I can be in my head and think about things.
Yeah. One of the common things that is a deal breaker is they meet people outside their little subculture and they go, oh my God, these are good people.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Because in church, you're taught that anybody that's outside of the church, they're just horrible, bad people. And, they may look good on the outside, but they're not good people.
We always used to say their sin remains.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I know you hate this cast of hate the sin, love the sinner.
Right. Oh, that's disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
Hate it. And that's the license, just like you said to your sister, we were trying not to be judgmental, and the church and Christians have no idea how much of an asshole they are.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things my daughter posted this weekend, I forget which platform, Instagram maybe, and it was this little quote from somebody saying, I love being alone, and if you want into my life, whether a friend or a partner, then you have to either maintain or enhance what I already have, so that when I'm with you, it's as good as that thing that I've already achieved when I'm alone.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally.
When your sister had to change her life for your presence, that's the opposite.
Oh yeah. Well, it's hard. It's hard putting on that facade for 2 or 3 days of. I can't swear in front of them. I can't do this. I can't
be myself.
I can't be myself.
Man, I have to gear up every time we go home for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, same. I mean, I still don't want to swear in front of my mom because, it's not the right thing to do.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
I try not to, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But now, when I was out for coffee with my sister and it was like, fuck this, fuck that, blah, blah, blah.
And get out the doobie.
Yeah, get out the doobie.
Well, it's a great story, and I'm glad to hear that you're free and happy, and your wife made the journey with you.
Yeah.
You got anything you want to say to tie a bow on it?
Well, I find myself incredibly fortunate because I know that I stuck around in the church for several years longer than I wanted to, until my wife had finally caught up to where I was to say, we got to get out. And I think the best thing we ever did, and I know this is around the time that I contacted you, Cass, is that we owned it. We were so worried about getting thrown out of the church that I wrote a letter and said, we're leaving. And they honestly didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Like we talked to some of the members afterwards, like a family that we were still kind of friends with. We really severed all ties with them. But we went out for coffee with them and explained our situation. And they said, yeah, everybody was dumbfounded that you guys just quit and owned it. And that was the best thing we ever did. We took responsibility for what we did and said, we're done. We can't deal with this anymore.
So you write the letter to the pastor?
To the church in general.
And they read it?
Yeah, they read it in front of the entire church.
Great.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, wow. That might lead others to that same thought.
Yeah.
They could see your courage. And this is something that, again, gets overlooked and that definitely our Christian friends and family don't understand. It took a lot of courage.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, yeah. Like, it was hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I agonized over it, sorry. And that's why I got in touch with you when I did.
Because you were hurting.
I was hurting. I had so many sleepless nights.
Wow.
The first month that we had left. And that was the other really sad part, is that we left and we didn't hear anything for a month. Like nobody phoned, nobody said, where are you? And my wife and I both said, I can guarantee you it's going to be so-and-so that calls. And it was the exact person that we thought that was about a month after we left.
The most empathetic person that you knew there.
Yeah. And then we wrote the letter and said, yeah, we're done. We can't do this anymore.
Wow.
So, I really encourage people that are walking away from their faith to own it, because it is so empowering to just say, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. This is my life. I want to live my life.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's striking is that we still sometimes adhere to some of the teachings of Jesus without even knowing it or trying it. And that is by writing the letter, you kick the dust off your feet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is this pursuit of honesty, like with the cost of being honest. And how is it that Jesus, or at least the people of Jesus, have made it hard to follow virtue?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I really, I look at how so many, like not just Church of Christ, but so many religions, they don't practice any of the empathy that Christ showed. I mean, not that any of it's really all that real in the New Testament, but in the Gospels, we talk about, well, you got to keep yourself clean and pure, but yet Jesus went and hung out with the prostitutes. He hung around with the tax collectors. And yet we don't want to do that. We want to just cloister ourselves as Christians and keep away from all the bad people because we could get infiltrated.
Yeah. Cloister's a good word. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing your story.
Paul.
I think it's a good one.
Thanks for allowing me to be on. I know in contacting you guys, I was worried. It was like, oh man, he's got guys who write books with PhDs and they've done all these theological things. And here's just schmucky old me trying to tell my story.
Yeah. Well, that's what we love is both. I mean, we do a little of both, but definitely everybody's got a story. And every human story is its own movie. I mean, we're sitting through a movie here, Bob.
Yeah.
I mean, we're watching the drama that's happening in real time. Truth is stranger than fiction.
Boy,
that's totally
true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really enjoy the personal stories that everybody shares. Mm-hmm. We all have slightly different journeys, but I think we've all shared in a lot of the same sort of things of having to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. The real story is in the nuance, I think. When you find, there's a lot of similarity, but it's always a little different. There's always something that's quite surprising.
Well, that's what makes it interesting, but what makes it comforting is the similarities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very true.
Yeah, because when you know you're not alone, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And that really was the big thing for me is to be added to the group and to see all these other people that were experiencing the same thing. And it's like, holy crap, I'm not alone. And then seeing like there is one gentleman that I think is probably about a half an hour's drive from here. And I keep thinking I should get in touch with him and try and just go for coffee and get to know him.
Yeah. Would that be Wayne Rumsby? I don't know. I'm very unfamiliar with the geography of your country. So
I'm trying to think where Wayne Rumsby is. I think he's in Southern Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the Bob
Barnes?
Bob Barnes?
Bob's been around for a while.
But he's up there.
Yeah, he's in Southern Ontario, I think, as well.
Okay. And those are the first two that come to mind.
Yeah, and I know like Joel De Los Santos, is it?
Yeah, Joel.
Oh, yeah, Joel.
A couple of weeks back, he's in Southern Ontario as well. And there's one fellow, I think he's up in Airdrie, which is, I'm trying to think in miles, it's about 25 miles north of here in Calgary.
Okay,
gotcha.
All right, man. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. All right, you too.
We'll see you.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right.
Freddie and Betty.
Yeah.
Is that like the Wilma and
Wilma and Fred?
Except they cross.
It could be.
It's the Flintstones swinging. I don't know.
Freddie and Betty. Anyway, yes. Freddy was quite good. That's not his real name.
Sweet guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Such a nice man and such a story to tell.
And he had both good and bad experiences with religion. His grandmother's religion was beautiful, and she modeled what he would consider to be ultimate model of a Christian, and yet, to his other denomination, she was going to hell.
So that hell thing was a big crack, as you said earlier, with a lot of cracks here.
Yeah, a lot of cracks.
Yeah, hell, and then his mom having a stroke. That was another big problem.
Yeah.
Interesting how you make meaning out of all this, and
well, eventually you can't.
Yeah,
that's the cogdis.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of cogdis, is it cognitive dissidence?
No,
it's with an N.
Dissonance.
Yeah, but a lot of people say dissidence.
Yeah, it's dissonance. Dissonance is a hearing thing, right? Where you don't hear anything.
Sonar.
Yeah, it's not it's a metaphor for, this problem you're having. Cognitively, when you see something, it doesn't sound right or it doesn't fit with
Well, it's a musical term.
Yeah, it's holding two ideas in your mind at the same time, and it doesn't fit.
It's if you play a note that's not in the key that you're playing in.
Right.
And it goes,
it doesn't sound. Yeah, something's wrong.
You know when that piano player hits the wrong key because of the dissonance.
Yeah, I always think of it as when you walk into a room and flip a light switch on and the light doesn't come on. And you go, what the?
It's supposed to.
It's supposed to come on. It's not working. You know what I mean? Something's wrong here. Well, and that's essentially what we're saying.
And Christianity's supposed to make us good people. It's supposed to heal the sick. It's supposed to do this or that. And when it doesn't, the light doesn't come on. You're like, something's wrong here.
Yeah. So
anyway, I've always said dissonance.
Yeah.
And then I hear people say dissonance, and it's probably not that big a difference.
No. Well, no.
What is dissidence?
When you're dissident, it's a word. I know that. That's a good question. We'd have to look that up.
A person who dissents, disagrees.
Oh, okay. A dissident. Yes.
So it's actually that's the noun. The adjective is disagreeing or dissenting in an opinion or attitude.
Okay. Well, so it would actually work either way, wouldn't
Cognitive disagreement.
Yeah.
So it's you got a battle going on in your own head.
Yeah, and that's
you're disagreeing
true.
with your doctrine.
Yeah,
etc.
So you could use it both ways. They both work, but dissonance is the correct title.
Yeah, it's the more. Word. It's actually. I mean, there's a scientific. I mean, it's kind of
it's a scientific notion or a psychological notion. Yeah, something or other. Yeah, wow, interesting stuff. Yeah, I know. You just have to kind of just step back and think about these things. That's a good thing about the program too. I think is lots to chew on. You know, you can think about it.
I'll tell you what makes my intros. When I write them, I realize that I could go back and write multiple drafts and really hone it in, and I sometimes do. But I have this notion, you know, when I go to a Shakespeare play or read Shakespeare, I am not understanding the sentences. But after hearing a paragraph or maybe an hour-long play or something, I got it. I got something.
Right.
Even though it wasn't as linear or word for word, you know, cognition, something was conveyed. And when I write these pieces at the beginning, I know that they're scattered. I mean, I know that they're disarray. I mean, they're somewhat of a stream of consciousness, and they don't really follow a teleos, or you know, they're all over the map in some ways. And my hope...
I don't find that, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my hope is that they come away... All right, this is the way I look at movies. I judge a movie by how it made me feel. And part of that is it stirred up some things that I got to go walk around the block. Because I got to decompress this, or I've got
to think about it.
I've got to think about this because this stirred up something in me.
Right.
And it may or may not have been the intent of the screenwriter or the director, but this is what I got from it. And that's one of the beautiful things, and I call it poetry in a way, because it is art. It is open to subjective experience. And being a subject, a human, with agency in my own thoughts. This is one of these things that you get after you leave Christianity, because those things are kind of subdued.
Right.
And so I think it's fascinating. I think it's exciting to expose myself to other people's thoughts and art, and then I subjectively adopt some of it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And it changes me.
Yeah, and they say, the theorists say, in a postmodern world, and a lot of people think we live in a postmodern world, and with Trump, it's maybe that's true. But in a postmodern world, you know, the producers of things, of scripts and
even
stories.
Postmodern literature is cryptic as fuck.
Yeah, and postmodern literature and all that stuff. The writer or the producer of that thing no longer holds a privileged position as to what it means. So it's back to this notion of subjectivity, like you said. It's what does it mean to you?
Right.
You know.
Well, and it's also what it means to them, because a lot of what I've experienced with postmodern literature is they're making up words that aren't in the dictionary.
Yeah. A lot of it is pretty wacky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even though you may not understand like you would if somebody explained to you that 2 + 2 = 4, just clear, cut and dried. You know, there's no ambiguity. You know, there's a lot
of richness in it.
Yes, and yet you come away with something.
Yeah.
That's what I think is fun.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you're right.
So there's a spirit, if you will, behind a human being's expression, even today. Every show, for that matter, is you're going to come away with, some cognitive things you may have learned, but you're also going to come away with feelings.
A sense. Yeah.
There's senses. And one of my main goals in life is to change, or at least let myself evolve. And organically. I don't like forcing things or putting on, poses or masks or something to create the image of change or evolution. But just a natural, organic thing that happens, and I use the metaphor of a rock that's dropped into a river. It could be all cranny and crooky and sharp-edged, and after years of being in that river, it's going to be smooth, because on all sides, water is no respecter of sides. It just goes after that rock on all sides, and so all those rough edges are going to be gone in 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And so all my rough edges are going to be exposed, or are going to be sanded down, if you will, by the exposure to all kinds of things, not just on one side of my rock where I just stay in the echo chamber of affirming what I already believe, and
it's a good
cognitive
metaphor.
Bias affirmation or whatever it is, and yet you try to listen to, expose yourself to stuff that's going to go, I have never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
that's gold. That's when you know you're changing, or at least exposing yourself to the potential for change. It's beautiful.
No, I like the idea. The idea of a sharp edge does stop things. It prevents, and then slowly you smooth out, and it's a good
takes
metaphor.
off your rough edges.
Yeah,
because it makes you prickly to the person who's trying to rub you in that section of your rock. I mean, they come at you and you poke back.
Yeah.
Whereas eventually you could maybe go, here's what I hear you saying, and I understand why you think that, and I think that might apply to my life in this way. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for loving me enough to be honest.
Yeah.
We don't have to get defensive when people say things that we disagree, or even confront us with feedback. Because if you really want to change, the only way you're going to change is by hearing something that offends you, or at least disagrees with you. Now, you might actually come away affirmed in your position that disagrees with theirs, but guess what? Your position is stronger. See, it's a win. You never lose.
Yeah, no, I agree. It makes me think of the Women's March and the guy off to the side yelling and screaming in the bullhorn about how women should stay home, and you're shaming other people and stuff. I sat there and looked at him and I thought, okay, I didn't want to confront him. I'm not interested in talking to him.
I flipped him off. But,
did you? Well, that's fine. You still have a little bit of a sharp edge there on that rock. But, but it's like after a while, it's like, well, that's okay. Weird.
Well, that guy and that type of person is the opposite of a listener, opposite of a learner.
Yeah.
Absolutely certain in their beliefs, and don't bother me with the facts.
And how could you talk to a guy like that? You can't. There's no talking. You just let him rant. I suppose it's America. He can rant as much as he wants, but it is offensive to me, and he certainly knew that.
Oh yeah,
he knew it was offensive.
Yeah, offend the flesh is a good thing in the scriptures.
Oh, really?
Your carnal mind. The gospel is a stumbling block to the wise. It's an offense. The rock of offense is another name for Jesus.
Gee whiz. Well, they got this down, don't they?
Because it's a humbling. You're going to have to humble yourself.
I'm humble. I got a lot to be humble about.
You are humble.
But you don't got to, this stuff is just bullshit, really. It's
totally.
It's just, come on. Oh, boy. Well,
why can't people be like us?
Yes, that's true. Come and be a smooth rock.
And I felt like this after I said this on the episode. I said something about how much courage it takes and how people don't get that. And I know that smacks of us patting ourselves on the back. And it also smacks of this other thing that is really hard to navigate, and that is, I feel so misunderstood. You know who says that? Ultra narcissists.
Oh, really?
Trump could say that. I feel so misunderstood. They don't understand me. I'm a good person or whatever. And he's kicking and scratching for affirmation because he says everybody agrees with me. He says, I'm the least racist person you'll ever talk to. I mean, he's kicking and scratching for recognition for that which his life doesn't portray.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect that at all.
Right.
No.
And so I'm just saying that when narcissists say, I'm so misunderstood, it's their way of doubling down on their own blind spots.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
But
good
when
observation.
somebody who really is in a circumstance where they've got an idea or a position or a posture or a paradigm, and everyone around them is wagging the finger at them for having it, and they say, I feel so misunderstood, that's legit. That's lonely.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not them doubling down on their blind spot. They're actually surrounded by people doubling down on their blind spots, and they just happen to be the pariah for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
So when a person who does have a unique thought and everybody around them is saying, no, what if? I mean, every invention or every, Galileo was hung or burned at the stake. And he could say, no one understands me. So there are times and places when not only it's okay to feel lonely in your paradigm, it's actually the way the world changes. So you got a narcissist saying no one understands me, and that's toxic because it keeps him trapped in his own delusion. Then you have a pioneer, a forerunner, who's on the forefront or on the frontier of new thinking, and he could say no one understands me, and he'd be right.
Right.
So just knowing the difference, that's all.
Yeah, that's true. I think Galileo was put in jail, though.
Oh, was it?
He was burned.
Either way, I mean, anytime that somebody came up with something that groupthink and strength in numbers is not always true. That's all I'm saying. In fact, and there is no greater loneliness than when you. And honestly, it's a fine line. I mean, because I've had thoughts before where everybody around me was like, no, and literally wanting me to recant.
Oh, okay.
It turns out I was right. Now, is that going to appeal to my ego? How would it not?
Sure.
I mean, I'm human.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make me evil. It doesn't make me a narcissist.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people in history like that. I remember reading something about...
And we're better for it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Sure. Who was it? The guy, Emerson.
The poet?
The great...
Ralph Waldo?
Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great transcendentalist, right? The poet, the writer, the Unitarian minister and all that.
Public intellectual.
Yeah, public intellectual. People would hear him speak and they would go, I don't have a clue what he said, but I know it's important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was, and these are the people, you're right, on the frontier, on the forefront, that change the way we think, change the way we understand. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's what I mean by navigate or negotiate that term. And you just got to be careful. If you're a person who says, I'm so misunderstood, I think it's worth, checking yourself and saying, am I saying that because these people are actually here to help me and I'm just being stubborn?
Yeah, you're asking people to think and
introspect.
Reflect on their lives, reflect on what they said, and how was today, and what was going on.
Well, that's how you become that smooth stone.
Yeah, but a lot of people, I don't think, want to do that.
Well, you have to admit, wrong.
Yeah.
Tara Brach says there's two kinds of people in the world. Those who want to be right.
That's good. I like that.
It's such an insecure place, and humans are insecure, and there's no getting around that. Everybody's insecure.
Right.
But self-awareness is that balancing effect of insecurity to where you know you're insecure and you don't have a problem being insecure. You just recognize that I might have to engage with my own defense system that's trying to protect me, the amygdala. And it's why we're here.
Right.
As far as the genes of people before us who listen to their amygdala, that's why we exist. So it's a good thing. But just knowing that it's a liar sometimes. When it says that rustle in the woods is a tiger, it's actually the wind rustling trees, and it's not an evil lie. It's just doing its job. But that's when you have to negotiate with that voice and say thank you for sharing that fear with me.
Yeah,
you turned out to be wrong, but I appreciate you, warning me.
Yeah, oh, that's good.
And that's a form of self-love.
Yeah.
And embracing what it means to be human.
Good observation.
Say yes to what is.
I agree. Let's do it again.
Peace out.
Yes. All right. See you, man.